So hey guys, it's St. Clare. I'm here speaking with Ian Davis of Alt-Right Ultras, and we're going to talk about some basic general ideas of the alt-right and what his some basic things about his ideology that I'm very interested in. I've never spoken before with anybody who identifies as alt-right. In the place that I live, most of the conservatives are of the John Kasich variety, the sort of bland,
Yeah.
lifeless, sort of
Conservative.
standard center-right politician.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to get his ideas on certain things. First of all, where would you say you would stand on the social spectrum? The first thing I ask of people is not whether they're more socialist or more capitalist. I'm not interested in whether or not they're left or right as much. I'm more interested in whether or not they are social libertarians or socially authoritarian. So where would you say you would stand on that sort of vertical spectrum?
Haha. Well, that leads us totally into what the whole movement is, and why it's not like people think it is. For a start, I shouldn't have said movement. It's not a movement. It was originally set up as an idea, as a talking shop, by a guy called Richard Spencer, who's quite a big and respected voice in the alt-right movement. And it's set up as a talking shop between all sorts of conservative, Republican, and general right-wing ideas. And this means that it stretches the gamut from full-on Nazis, kind of all the way over to libertarian, not socialists, a push. Libertarians, yes, but there's a lot of libertarians that we wouldn't feel we identify with as being alt-right at all. I mean, plain bog standard libertarians, fine, and conservative libertarians, fine. We absolutely identify with them. But we would look at socialist libertarians as just being leftist infiltrators in a lot of our movements.
I mean, like the kind of Christopher Hitchens style, sort of libertarian, but also sort of socialist, slightly Marxist. He had a very strange set of ideas where he was left wing, but he was also socially libertarian.
Yeah, I think he was maybe left wing in his youth, and then socially libertarian towards the end of his life. I mean, he certainly was very keen on going and sorting out Islam by the sword, and he had absolutely no problem with being unspeakable to unspeakable people.
Right. I don't know what
he would have kind of fitted into the alt-right.
Social justice, but I assume that he didn't care for them very much. But I don't recall ever seeing any footage of him actively denouncing feminism or social justice.
Well, I don't think social justice was the bigger problem.
I suppose it's more of a more recent development, but feminism, of course, has been a problem for decades.
Yeah, and he had been critical of them. He wrote a book, Why Women Can't Be Funny. I mean, that's pretty critical of feminism. He had been critical of feminism, but I don't think he regarded it as much of a problem to the West as Islam say, and I don't think he regarded the left wing in general as a problem, because they hadn't shown that the vast activity that they've shown since his death. I mean, then he could counteract the left with the four horsemen, but just by keeping atheism on track as being a skeptical movement rather than a political movement. You see, this is the big problem, and this is why you, in a way, have the alt-right, why they have found an echo chamber that they never really previously needed to go and talk. They just don't want to be disrupted by left-wing voices, and that is all it will ever be with left-wing voices. They will repeat their dogma. They will try and fuck up your conversations, fuck up your discussions, and leave it all in a confused, conflicted mess. They don't come to politics other than their own without trying to destroy or co-opt it. I mean, so we are it's a reaction. Certainly, it's a reactionary situation to the left, and there's no platforming of people. And it's very much like, well, if we can't have a platform with you, we'll go and have a platform with each other, and it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, because we're going to have a wide platform of ideas. And this is what you have in the alt-right. You know, there's people like Judgy Bitch and Ruth V and even Milo, who you could say are not traditionally alt-right and maybe have much more to do with free speech movements and men's rights movements and that kind of thing.
So you would say that Milo is not precisely a member of the alt-right, or does not precisely espouse alt-right ideas?
No, he absolutely doesn't. He would say this and we would say this. I mean, we would say, yeah, we love what Milo says, we love his politics and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, he's Jewish, he's homosexual, and he miscegenates. And people in our groups would say that. Now, I would be of the opinion of like, yes, well, so what? He's allowed to, and he's not harming anyone else by doing that, except perhaps himself and some black boys. He's not. Well, yes, he's not. He's not saying because I do this. There's no position that says him doing that really affects our politics as his personal choice. When he starts advocating it as a lifestyle to everyone else, which he's careful not to do, and which he doesn't genuinely do. Yeah,
I've noticed he's not.
Yeah.
Whenever he talks about his own homosexuality, he seems to care more about using it for humor rather than politics, rather than anything like that. He doesn't.
Well, here's a point I'd like to get out about Milo. I was listening to his speech yesterday at I don't know, UC, I forget where it was, the University of California somewhere, one of their, Irving, I think maybe. It was the one where he comes on with his mariachi band. But in the question and answer session, somebody did ask him about the alt-right. Do you consider yourself a member of the alt-right? And he said,
I haven't seen this. I haven't seen this. So you're telling me news to me.
It happened yesterday. It's news to everyone, and this is why I want to get it out, as it were, because I'm saying this to the alt-right as well as to the people who would be listening from your audience. He has said he's not a member of the alt-right, but he has spoken about the alt-right and given it a much fairer shake than the rest of the media, and in my opinion, a much fairer shake than Sargon, who I am pretty sure came with his own ideas made up, that like everybody was a Nazi.
Yeah, I think when I watched his video, you really got the idea that he had made up his mind before he actually did his research.
Yeah, well, especially when he was doing the Milverton Willows thing. But I mean, that all went very badly wrong.
That's why I wanted to ask you specifically, what are the ideas of the alt-right? Because I don't have any preconceived notions.
Right. Well, overall, our ideas center around things like the preservation of Western culture, the prevention of white genocide as we see it. And by that, we don't actually mean a white genocide with black people stomping around in Nazi uniforms, throwing us into gas chambers. We're worried about the foolish left-wing governments in our Western countries at the moment, thinking they can invite the world's great unwashed in and solve their problems, when it doesn't. We're such a tiny chunk of the population that every time we help people from abroad, we're just helping those individuals. It's more or less the same as saving one person and forgetting about the rest.
You're right. Right. I understand that.
All the immigration we feel is going to do for Europe and for Western countries is to breed out white people, to put them into a position where they are almost wiped out. And by that, and by the inaction of that, you will see a collapse in Western capital and civilization, which will affect the world badly, because if all that collapses, all the modern stuff collapses, you're not going to have the same technology, you're not going to have the same provision of medicine around the world, you're not going to have people with big planes that can fly in emergency food to areas that are badly hit, because we'll be dead, because it won't be being done by other races in the world.
I don't know, I see a great deal of the same type of attitudes in European culture. I see very similar attitudes in the Far East, for example, Japan, which is a very modern.
The honorary Aryans, as the Fuhrer called them.
Yeah.
Are they being white?
I do understand the idea that European and Asian and Middle Eastern and North African peoples were very different, and certain Native Americans were very different from the rest of the world, the rest of Africa and Aboriginal Australia. It almost as if there at a point there became two different subbreeds of human.
Yeah,
I think that may have
subbreeds in a strictly taxonomical term. We're not calling people subhumans at this stage.
Of course. That's it seems to me that there were places. I think it may have had something to do with the Ice Age, because whenever you subject a large group of organisms to that kind of peril, the ones who survive are going to be better
Darwinian adaptability.
And in human society, this led to humans having to develop better tools, better technology, better sorts of social structures in order to survive.
Yeah,
and that's why you see after the Ice Age ended, you saw these groups of people building new societies, forming empires.
And you've hit
whereas the rest of the world, whereas Africa, Aboriginal Australia, certain island peoples stayed in a state that was far closer to our Homo sapien ancestors.
Blissful ignorance, where you just had to feed yourself and be born and die. Yeah,
there's something to be said for the fact that the rest of Africa and Aboriginal Australia did remain tribal, whereas Europe, Asia, parts of North Africa, and the Middle East, which were better or better by one estimate.
Well, I don't. That might be
no. They were better. They were more exposed to the ice sheets, and so there was a greater dying off. There was a greater incentive to
well, no, but they weren't exposed to the ice sheets, though. That's the thing. They would have gone as far north as they could and still survive. They wouldn't have started wandering around on the ice sheets, or they wouldn't have found themselves stuck on an ice sheet that suddenly appeared.
The diaspora of humanity happened. The shift of the mass migration of humans out of Africa happened before the Ice Age, and by the time the Ice Age occurred, there were humans living on all different sorts of the planet, and the ones who and on all different places all over the planet.
Yeah, but
the ones who were more exposed to that peril were the ones who developed
the Ice Age. So we were pushed out of Europe. Anyone who went into Europe before the Ice Age would have been pushed back out again, because the Ice Age went down right to more or less where I live in England, which is right down the bottom. So they weren't.
It seemed. I think there was a gradient of there had to have been a gradient. So it was better. It was better to be on Southern Europe than it would have been Northern Europe, and it was better to be in North Africa than it would have been Southern Europe. And by better, I mean you would have been less likely to die, but you also would have been less likely to develop.
Well, all this stuff is very
as a group, you would have been less likely to develop, because you would have had less of incentive to survive, and that's why you see Africans and Aboriginal Australians who developed the least, I guess you could say.
Well, I think the adaptability element comes in that, like, the climate is so much different to forage and hunting and to glean a living from. You have winter up here. That's the thing. That's the big difference. You have to prepare for winter to survive the winter, whereas you don't have to do that in Africa. You can still find stuff all throughout the winter, because it doesn't snow. The leaves don't drop off the trees. Things are more not evergreen, but they hold their leaves year round, and they do stuff year round. So in that way, it is harder for us, and it sets us up to be more survival orientated. Which, and if you look at it like that, it's an absolutely simple, logically blinding thing. You don't have to worry about where the ice went and where man came from. You can just look that it is much harder. You have to be much cleverer to make a living in the colder parts of the world than you do in the nice, comfortable, temperate, warm parts of the world. And that's the difference.
I've always tried to sort of find ways of explaining or finding ways of explaining why it was Egypt, Sumeria, the Fertile Crescent, why that was why, and China, of course, the Yellow River Valley, why these were the first parts of the world that developed advanced civilizations.
Yeah, but this is only us who think that.
Well, because that's what
I mean, not everybody thinks that they were the first civilization on the world. A lot of people are very, very puzzled as where the Sumerians and the Egyptians got all their wonderful science, let alone their building skills, from out of nowhere. Bang, it's the Stone Age. Bang, the birth of civilization.
Well, where did it come from?
It couldn't have happened that fast. And we're looking at Olmec structures in over in South America.
Well, Native Americans are descended from Asians. Native Americans are descended from Asians.
Possibly. Again, we don't know these as full facts. This is just history, and this is just our modern view of history. You've only got to watch. Look at the Ancient Aliens series. They went off looking for aliens helping people, and accidentally they've discovered that prehistory started a lot earlier, and we were civilized a lot earlier than we thought, and that the Great Floods pretty much destroyed all remnants of that. Because you think people are generally coastal. Especially in the Bronze Age, people were coastal.
When you say Great Floods, what are you referring to?
The Great Floods that preceded the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and that kind of thing. The Bronze Age, rather.
You mean the collapse of the Black Sea? You mean the Black Sea collapse?
Well, we don't know exactly, but around the same time, you know, the England got separated from mainland Europe. Around the same time, the floods happened that gave you the stories from the Sumerian stuff. We assume that the Mediterranean filled in, and it certainly looks like there had been cultures and temples under the water that got submerged. Stuff in Egypt got submerged even before the Aswan Dam and things. So there's a lot of evidence that I'm
very interested in ancient history because I'm very interested in human history to try to discover things about our own origins. So
I think there was just a really quite advanced culture. It wasn't a technologically advanced culture, but it had time to pursue wisdoms. Things like astrology and things like the basic physics and the patterns of the universe and of life and of health and that kind of thing. It had plenty of time to make a big bunch of scientific and social discoveries, but they weren't the same social discoveries and scientific discoveries that we had. They were similar, but they were slightly different. Like they'd understand electricity, but they'd have different names for it, and they wouldn't really be able to use it. They'd understand a lot of astronomy, but then they'd start sticking, well, it's all animals and different spiritual houses, and they'd chuck a lot of spirituality on it.
What do you think was the cause? See, this kind of thinking, it's very...
I think a big flood broke up this earlier world civilization, forced them all to flee and try and rebuild their original culture. And their original culture came back sort of like it was, but not as good. Really not, because they'd missed bits, they'd forgotten bits and that kind of thing. That's why, although you can see that Egyptians and the early Americans have very, very similar ways of stoneworking. They have very similar ideas of astronomy, hieroglyphics, and language and that kind of thing. And when I say language, I mean written language.
Obviously.
And these have so many similarities, even down to the using pyramids to put your dead in and for worship and that kind of thing. They had these similarities.
I always made the assumption that humans had a propensity for building certain things and for developing certain systems of writing because of how our brains work.
Yep, that's also quite probable. But equally, when that happens, as had happened in the early development of civilizations, even after the Great Flood, you get language being used generally as a trade thing. Language often comes as a result of the mathematics of trade. which is why we use figure symbols for both. You know, you'd think carrying an abacus around would make more sense. Calculators. Now we're kind of away from the language of it, but then we had the language of mathematics, and we still do. It's still a language, and those two were, I think, more intertwined, which they're less so now. We have maths one side, we have all the numbers one side, nice and neatly, and we have all the letters the other side, nice and neatly. But then there were far more complex conceptual characters that made links between numbers and links between constants. So like they wouldn't have they'd have a symbol for infinity. They'd have a symbol in their ancient Vedic things for the speed of light, and it would be a number, but it'd be a symbol that describes these kind of things. And they used all this crap a lot, so it showed that they knew it. There's so many built into the pyramid. There is the speed of light. There's the speed at which the world revolves. There's
the speed of light.
Yeah, there's a direct reference to apparently one of the sides is something like 2. Well, anyway, the first bunch of numbers are exactly the same as the speed of light on the length of one of these walls or whatever. And other spiritual volumes. I can't.
That seems like conjecture to me.
Oh, it was conjecture to a certain extent, but they were all there. There were a whole bunch of different stuff pulled from the mathematics of a pyramid. All of it indicating that, like, at a certain date, there are big turnabouts in the earth which can be disastrous. And that's sort of what that was trying to say. Now we've gone so far away from our original topic.
I'm sorry. It's just the alt-right. I apologize.
Yeah, there's no problem. But I'm just wondering how we're going to get back from here. We're in fucking Egypt now.
It's not going to segue. It's not going to segue.
But so how did we get here? Why am I talking about the ancient world in regard to?
We were talking about the shit.
Yeah, how humans originated, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, you see, to our lot, we don't really care
about differences in race and things of that nature.
Yeah, to our lot, we don't really care. I mean, the problem is that there are people out there saying the white race must be destroyed. People in power, people like Angela Merkel, people like the United Nations, and people like Black Lives Matter, La Raza, all the left everywhere are saying white people are the problem and white people must go. And this is why we are here, and this is why we're the alt-right, because these fucking Nazis are wandering around threatening our lives. So we are in absolutely every right to do whatever we like back to these people. They're threatening us with death. We should just go around and fuck them. Yeah. That's sort of what the alt-right is about these days, in some ways.
What is the counter? What is the counter argument to white people must die? What is the counter argument to that, though? White people must not die? I mean, that doesn't seem like much of an argument.
To quote Hitchens, yeah, we don't need a counter argument if what you are presenting has absolutely no factual base or use.
I'm curious as to what your goals are. What is your?
Well, we don't have any goals. I told you we're a talking shop. We're discussing stuff.
Right. Okay.
About the alt-right.
Okay.
What do you expect us to do? Take over the Reichstag?
Part of finding out what the alt-right is all about is trying to
understand
what their goals are, what their intentions are. What do they?
We don't have any intentions.
Right, because you're not a group. You're not a movement.
We're not a movement. We're not a group. We're not planning to change anything. Now, the Natsoks might. The Libertarians might. The Hawaiian Nationalists might. I mean, if I could say there is one thing at the core of the alt-right that does keep coming up, it's the idea of an ethno-state, that white people should have the opportunity to live in a state where it's full of other white people. Every continent has places where only their race live. You can look at Saudi Arabia, plenty of places in Africa, plenty of places all over China, Japan, plenty of places where one race lives and they're the majority. They have asylum seekers, they have immigrants, they have all this other stuff, but they don't have specifically multicultural societies. And that's what keeps the world diverse and interesting. Now, the left, they want to bundle it all together, but pretty much only in the West. Now, why are they not saying there are not enough white people in Africa?
I'm not interested in diversity whatsoever. I'm interested in practicality. So if it is determined that Western culture or Western democracy is the best way to run a system, and I would guess that it probably is, at least the best that we've mustered, I would rather, instead of having other people from other nations and other cultures come to European and American nations, I would rather extend Western culture and Western democracy to those other places. People on the left talk about all the time how they want to help, you know, Mexicans by letting them come over here. Well, what's so bad about you people, you progressives, going down to Mexico and trying to make it a better place to live?
Well, because it costs a lot of fucking money, and why should we do that? Why should we give these fucking Mexicans...
It's not like they care that much.
I'll tell you what I find retarded, that they're coming out calling themselves La Raza, and even in the early days of La Raza, because it's actually quite old, they were a mix of indigenous Indian people, brown immigrants, and Asians. And their idea was to go up into America and recapture areas that they thought were theirs, like California and Texas and that kind of thing. And they did go up and they did kill a bunch of people. But all the while, and that happened. It's early on in America's history.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of after the cowboy period, and I think before the Civil War.
All right.
I think.
I think the cowboy period. I think the cowboy period is after the Civil War.
Is it? All right.
Yeah, but before the Industrial Revolution really kicked off.
Right. Well, it's around that kind of period.
19th century.
But the original slogan of La Raza was, "For the race, everything; outside the race, nothing." And when you've got an organization composed of 3 races, that's a really fucking stupid slogan. But then these are fucking stupid people who will buy into that by the look of it, because this organization has kept going even to today. And what you've got to look is that most of the La Raza are claiming about, oh, the horrible American white man and you Americans and that kind of thing. Who do they think they are? They're the Spanish. They invaded America in the first place. If it wasn't for them, there would be no white men anywhere there. They are the fucking problem. The nerve of these fucking people.
Most people sort of forget that it was Spain. It was the conquistadors who first conquered America. It wasn't England. It wasn't France. It wasn't any of the Scandinavian nations. It was Spain and Portugal.
And well, they seem to have shifted the blame now, and that's what the left are doing, because they're not interested at all in righting the wrongs of history. They don't care about lesbians and gays. They don't care about blacks. They don't care about La Raza one little bit. They want to run all of those shows for them. You notice in their attitude, they always saying like, oh, you have to support us because otherwise you're a traitor to your race. They feel they own these people. They own these groups. Yes. And what happens when communism comes along? These people get the shit kicked out of them. Look what happened to the gays under communism. They didn't do very well at all, did they?
Right. I've noticed that feminism in particular seems to be dropping white gay men from their concern.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that you have people now who are, and it's obvious that would happen because women essentially consider homosexuals to be competition for mates.
I suppose, yeah.
So you basically going to come to expect that. But when it comes to these other nations, obviously people are trying to flee terrible treatment under a horrendous government, and instead of allowing them to come here, why don't you just try and improve those governments in those nations? I mean, domestically. I mean, that's what I would say to the left. That's what I would say to the left. Don't let them come here. You go there and work up the population to try and fucking.
Well, I know how they'd answer that one.
Revolt.
I know how they'd answer that one.
That seems to be much better.
We do a lot. Who do you think the SWP in South Africa are, and that kind of thing, and the ANC and that kind of thing? They do that. They do that. They go around, what's the word, destabilizing countries all over the world and trying to send them socialist or communist.
Yeah, it's terrible when Marxism comes into the picture, because.
But equally, like the global corporatists are also doing this, and the global corporatists seem in the modern era to support the left. When you've got George Soros and the others, and the Rothschilds throwing money at the left, these left-wing causes like La Raza and Black Lives Matter.
Well, I think I would rather choose corporatism over Marxism any day. I agree with C.S. Lewis, who said it would be better to live under robber barons than under benevolent moral busybodies, because the difference is the former can be appeased occasionally.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen. Say, like, you get African states that are nominally socialist, but they're run by a big old dictator who wants to get rich. You know, there are people who can survive and live in those societies. Okay, they do all right. They don't do so bad. There are people who are dissidents. They have a fucking horrible time. There are people who are peasants. They have a fucking horrible time. But there is still a chunk of that country that can operate normally-ish. Because this guy is a tyrant, he's a socialist, but he wants to be rich and he's appeased. And every time he flies off to spend a month in fucking Paris, the country's all right again. And then you have places like the Soviet Union, or perhaps a worse example, Cambodia, where they are so keen on doing the best for the revolution and for the future society that they'll absolutely execute thousands of people with knives in a field just because we don't know what to do with them. We haven't got anything to feed them with. There'd be trouble if we let them wander around, so we best just kill all these people. We can't use them.
I can't recall a single point, a single nation in which, a single time in history in which socialism has ever worked. Until recently, the left could claim that Northern Europe was
nominally socialist. Yeah.
Right. And they could claim that, see, this is an idea that socialism or social democracy could work. Well, it's collapsing under its own weight.
Yeah, and all they've shown is that, like, if the parasite isn't particularly greedy, then the host can live for a fair bit longer than if the parasite was greedy. Right. But sooner or later, that parasite gets bigger and it gets greedy. And that is all that they're saying. That the left hasn't completely taken over the Europe, just in a sort of social way, and they've survived all right. Whereas in a country like Venezuela, where they take over the social side of things and all the financial and business side of things, it goes rapidly tits up. And Venezuela has gone rapidly tits up. It's only been 20 years tops, hasn't it, since Chavez took over, and bosh, it's fucked. It was a really rich country before. It was a dodgy country.
The left likes to talk about all the time about how the United States going into South American countries and assassinating or deposing socialist leaders and propping up capitalist dictators, how terrible that was. But how terrible would it have been if Allende had remained in power, or if any of those people had essentially, I think it would have been far worse.
I think it would have been far worse. And I can see why they were removing people that could, by some people, be considered moderates, because, like, they were still kind of lefty, they were still kind of socialist, and the people around them would have taken them that way given time. Give that 10 years, give that 15 years, then it will be another Cuba. That's the way they were looking at it. And America did a lot. The main reason was to push businesses down there and to exploit these countries. I'll make no bones about that. I've read a lot of the stuff that Alan Dulles was up to when he was in charge of the CIA, and when they had the School of the Americas going, where they were just teaching dictators and teaching subversion to the disenfranchised and the disgruntled from these countries, and sending them back to do the work of the global corporatists in taking over these countries, exploiting these governments and that kind of thing. And this is the fun bit of being alt-right. We more or less get to criticize everyone. Left and right.
What do you think is worth criticizing on the conservative side? Just out of curiosity.
The foreign policy. This is one thing the alt-right doesn't like. We would like our ethno-state. with all us whiteys living in it, where we don't particularly bother the world unless they bother us. So many of us are against like global capitalism and against aggressive foreign policy. I mean, this is one of the reasons a lot of us like Donald Trump. It's the immigration thing, obviously, and this not fucking people about in foreign policy terms, because we understand that this global corporatism is very akin to socialism, and in that way, as anti-Marxists, we kind of don't like this sort of statist stuff. We also recognize that the things Trump has been saying about aggressive foreign policy are like open wounds to us. They're like an open vein that just drains our money out and throws it into the air and burns it, because these wars never achieve anything except for the corporatists.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And, you know, warfare, I'm beginning to think that warfare, I'm not against the concept of warfare. I'm really not. No. But I'm, as an idea, I mean,
we should only be against the concept of instigating wars. We should have no problem with fighting them and defending ourselves.
I think that I take an anti-war stance completely out of a sense of fiscal conservatism, because we're spending every decade, we spend more and more on the military, and we're subjected to sharply diminishing returns on investment. And we don't, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars fighting in these fucking sand pits, and nothing ever becomes of it. Nothing ever becomes of it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Who is calling for all these wars? It's never America. It's nearly always like, what happens is the corporatists lean on the UN, and a few countries in the UN start squeaking and saying, oh, this must happen. Look at this terrible situation here. America must go and do something about that. And more often than not, this is just the corporatists using the Hegelian dialectic to set up a situation where the corporatists pop in with a solution to the problem, which is, America, you go to war, we'll loan you some money to do it, and we'll sell you all the stuff you need to set up and do your war and make the country good afterwards. Come on, the UN wants you to do it. Be the world policeman. You know, this makes you look strong in front of the world. And what actually happens is the UN start all these fucking stupid fights because they're very greedy, idiotic people when they're in their individual chunks. You think they're venal leaders from all over the world. They're none of them as smart as our politicians, and they're none of them as clean as our politicians. And you know how stupid and corrupt our politicians are. So they're worse than that. All their plans are always going to fuck America up. And to this stage, they design them to do that. They say, well, you know, we can get out there. We can make some money off this by stealing some of that oil and shifting it over borders. We can make some money by selling a load of weaponry to the side that they're going to be fighting and bombing.
To my knowledge, the only people who made money, the only people who made anything, the only people who had any good outcome out of the war in Iraq were the oil contractors.
Yep, and
half a million dead people, 500,000 dead people.
Yeah,
millions of dollars wasted.
Yeah, and it isn't just the oil companies either, because somebody's got to provide everything from paper clips to like 20-foot sections of concrete wall and shipping containers by the million, shipping containers everywhere. Yeah, so you've got all this global shipping, every element of the big businesses, the big chunky businesses that can sort amazing chunks of stuff. They all get something in the pocket. Nobody back in America makes a red cent. No smaller businesses make a red cent. People die, money is wasted, civilians are killed. None of it solves any of the world's problems, you know, because our problems really these days could all be solved with reasonable trade treaties and dialogue. I mean, why are we getting into a shouting match with Russia? I mean, we're building up armed forces along the border with Russia, and they're doing exactly the same. And Europe's on the verge of collapse. The European Union is on the verge of everyone Brexiting it out. What are they thinking? It's insane. To stay in the EU,
this is the type of stuff you see at the beginning of every Fallout video game.
Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? And everyone's banging along doing their normal stuff and whistling in the air, and then boom. Yeah, it's the beginning of Fallout 4, exactly.
I mean, if you look at the original intros to Fallout 1 and 2, basically and I know it's just a video game, but
Yeah.
the prelude to war is always resource wars and the collapse of the European Union. And Jesus Christ, we're seeing that. This is right in front of our eyes. Maybe 2077 wasn't a very terrible date to place that.
Yeah,
maybe it was a little bit late.
Yeah, well, yeah. It is. I mean, this is exactly the kind of stuff is going on has led up to the Second World War. All the degeneracy, all the tolerance, all the foolishness. It's just, and people people feeling that they're over safe. That's another problem, because people feel they're so safe, they're not working very hard, and our societies don't work very hard anymore. Welfare has really screwed America up, because in a way it's been it's kind of not universal welfare. Some people always do well over there, and some people are always going to need their welfare and EBT cards.
There was a very, very large back when I used to be a progressive. When I was younger, I was influenced by people like Jon Stewart and his band of cronies, and people like Stephen Colbert and
but they're just comedians. I wouldn't worry too much.
Really, but that sort of begun my sort of political opinions. Was just listening to people like that, and it took me a while. It took me a long time to break away from that. But one of the things that I did, one of the opinions that I always had that was anti progressive, was that I was against the concept, not the concept of welfare, but that we spend so much on it.
On welfare, yeah.
I mean, we're the people who don't work in this country make more money than people who do work. That's insane. That's absolutely appalling.
Yeah, it is. And there's an element to that bloody echo. No, it's all right. It's just screwing me up because I can't think.
Maybe if I move a little further away from the television.
Might do,
yeah. Okay. All right, is that a little bit better?
Let's see. It should be. Seems a little bit, yeah. I've really lost my train of thought now.
We were talking about welfare.
Welfare. Yeah, and it's not only our internal welfare that's the problem. We are so busy with international welfare, with throwing money at other countries to support them and to ensure the foreign policy results that we want. We throw money at Afghanistan and Pakistan by the multi-millions. We're throwing money at Europe. We're throwing all this money at people while we're also putting our own people through austerity and reducing welfare for our own people and that kind of thing. Except for the people who don't really seem to need the welfare. There are people that seem to need welfare, but then again, you look at everybody on every corner that's spending all day selling crack. They're all on welfare as well.
Obviously, yes.
And
I understand giving it to somebody who's legitimately disabled, who legitimately can't work, but I don't. Somebody who's completely able-bodied, somebody who's just sitting in their home all day, just, I don't know, jacking off and watching HBO. No.
But here's the problem. You think about, say, oh dear. What if these people, some of these people are just so, no, I'm about to say something terrible.
You don't have, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be afraid.
I think some of the element of welfare is that the state realizes these people, if they tried to get any value from them, if they tried to force like 500 black people into a factory, it would be more trouble than it was ever profitable. Because like every other week you would have a massive fight that stops production and like break machinery and that kind of thing. You would have people who just could not learn their jobs.
Substantiate that? Because I don't mind if something sounds terribly racist. All I care is if there's evidence behind it.
I could substantiate it, really. I could show you all the videos of what happens just in their communities and in the schooling situations, and how that doesn't tend to happen in classes full of white people, or even classes that are mixed to a decent degree.
I'm not particularly bothered by racism. For example, you know, on IQ test, Asians and whites.
Here is the thing. A lot of the things we believe, we will never be able to prove because we're not allowed to do any fucking research on it. Who is going to let us set up a study like that to see if it's more profitable to run a factory full of black people or white people? The race realism research will never be done, and that is what annoys us. You know, you won't even give us a chance. The left won't even give us a chance to be right. They won't even give anyone a chance to approach reasonable answers. They
tell you that you don't have evidence for your claim, and then they don't put you in a position where you can actually do research. I understand it completely.
Yeah, and then they've got reams and reams of their own falsified data that has been peer-reviewed by their own friends and passed around the circle until it becomes real and becomes law in the Goebbels tell a big lie fashion. Dogma.
It's dogma. It's just that's what dogma is. I mean, when people refer to feminism and social justice and basically the left in general as a religion, they're not very far from the truth. They just don't believe in any sort of god. They don't worship any gods or objects. That's the only difference between.
You say that, but there are progressive churches. I was looking at one the other day. I forget his name actually, but it was a jolly old affair, and it was going on about Christianity and all these progressive values. And then you got to the page, the section on it on actually faith. And there were 4 articles there about the Torah. Oh, right. This is a progressive Christianity. Add an echo there. So you get that. Like, you have people pressing for progressivism to become a faith. And also you should remember, like, the People's Temple here, the Reverend Jim Jones and Guyana Town and all that kind of thing, or Jonestown in Guyana, where all the mass suicides happened.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yep, they were talking about social justice in every sermon.
There was a lot of those cults that rose up in the 60s and 70s were very communist in nature, and not just Marxist, but communist.
And I think they were very communist, that lot, but they were also very Christian, and they were also to a degree controlled. And so it shows that Marxism very much would like to become a religion.
Well, I think that's definitely the case. I think, you know, there have been people on the left, among the Marxist left, who have rose to a state of almost sheer reverence.
Yeah, absolutely. Che Guevara, for instance, Lenin. And Marx himself, of course. I mean, that's
in modern times. Just look at the Bernie Sanders crowd. You know, they consider him almost to be a personal Jesus. They consider him a Messiah figure.
Yeah, because they haven't read it.
On the left all the time, making comparisons between Jesus and Bernie Sanders. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, like when
I've actually seen people like Kyle Kalinske who actually makes comparisons. Or did, but between Jesus and Bernie Sanders. Well, mostly in an attempt to convince the right to vote for him, which didn't work.
Well, they were both Jews. I mean,
well, a lot of people on the right like to make the argument that Jesus was a Marxist before Marxism was a thing, or was a socialist before socialism was a thing.
Now,
which I guess could be somewhat substantiated.
While we've got here, like, you should probably ask us about the Jew thing.
I was kind of okay.
This is why people associate the alt-right with Nazism, because aside from just the National Socialists, a lot of us do see that coming out of a tradition of Jewish abstract thought and intellectualism. This is where Marxism has sprung from. And then we go on to look at how the actual Soviet Socialist Republic was formed. And we notice that most of the original members of the NKVD and the people concerned, they were Jewish. Yeah, there were
Yes, I
so
recall
many
reading about in Poland, a lot of the after World War II, a lot of a lot of a lot of the Kremlin's cronies in Poland, they basically they were Jewish, of course, and they basically engaged in a second Holocaust of German citizens living in Poland, and nobody ever talks about that on the left or the right.
No, well, we do.
And this was done by this was done by Jewish followers of
communism. Yeah.
yes.
People don't realize that the Weimar Republic that preceded the German, the Nazis and that kind of thing, that was 50-50 communism and right-wingers in different parts of the country who hated each other.
It was basically an enormous argument between communism and fascism, and it was just that fascism ultimately won. If communism had won, it would have been just as terrible. I mean,
well, the communist one.
You might make the argument that the German the Nazi Party was, which it does. I've heard people say that they were on one side of the argument or they were on the other, but I think they would be more on the right.
Yeah. But anyway, we see that, and we also look at how most of the major banks, especially the central banks that lend to governments and that kind of thing, are kind of run by Jewish financial houses. A lot of the media is run by Jewish, well-financed people, and is then gatekept and staffed by Jewish people all over the media and all over Hollywood and television and that kind of thing. And you know, it's not. It's pretty damn obvious that something's going on, especially when these self-same organizations are pushing all this leftist rhetoric. It's too much of a coincidence for there not to be a Zionist push, and this is where I would like to split it from just anti-Semitic hate of Jews to a push against Zionism, which is quite evil in its own way. If you think about it, it wants to set up an Israeli nation state. That's the good bit. The bad bit is after that it wants to immunize to bring along the second coming of Christ and that kind of thing, to bring the world to an end. Yeah, that's it. They want to end the world anyway and have a massive, big old war where God comes back and everything's hunky-dory for the Jewish people. And there's also this idea where in Zionism where they expect the rest of the world to be their slaves, effectively, after this Zionist utopia is achieved. So I see no evil in opposing that kind of goal. Not worried about the anti-Semitism thing at all, because I don't hate Jews. I mean, they're just people.
I think I would agree with you, but the problem with that is it's most of the progressive left seems to be anti-Zionist.
Like Germans and Nazis. You don't blame all the Germans for the actions of the Nazis.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Of course not.
And I would like to think that's the way.
There are some on both the left and the right who would disagree with that.
Yeah, but there's a lot in my camp who disagree with me there as well. I go, no, I actually fucking hate Jews. It's their big fucking ears and the noses. They're just beast people. But they're not, of course, are they?
I don't like making large sweeping statements about large groups of people based on certain individuals within that group, ever.
Yeah, it's just a great way to be sweepingly wrong. Very quickly.
Sargon.
Yeah, Sargon. Yeah, he does make some generalizations, but Sargon, bless his heart, he didn't come from the atheist movement where we were battling every day using critical thinking and fallacy spotting and all that kind of stuff. And we were fighting with each other as much as we were fighting with Christians who were relatively easy. So all of us have become very good at getting each other into arguments that cannot be got out of with sophistry. And because I don't think Sargon's had that upbringing, some of his stuff just does drift off into, well, that's not logical, mate. How do you figure that? Or other times I think, you're pulling a fast one there, but of course he isn't. He just doesn't realize it's a fallacy. But that he himself is thinking fallaciously.
Sorry, I generally do like Sargon, and that makes it all the worse when he's wrong, or when he makes fallacious arguments. And you tend to want to criticize people more fiercely when you actually enjoy them.
Right.
Or constructively criticize, rather.
Yeah, I save my I save my condemnation for when he's wrong about something that I give a shit about. So in that way, I'm equally hypocritical. But generally, there's so many YouTubers out there all saying this kind of stuff that unless you're actually a YouTuber, there's no service in me for pointing it out. I don't win any prizes.
I'm trying to be part of that YouTuber community. I'm trying to make this a sort of career for myself. But you know, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I really want it to. And I want to be part of the dialogue as well. I really do. And this is the first opportunity I've had to do that, and I think I've completely botched it.
I don't know. I think it's a difficult time to come in because we're sort of between happenings. Gamergate's died down quite a bit. The election in Brexit is taking up all the activists' time, and we're all looking outwards towards the voters and towards the public.
I'm guessing you're on the Leave side.
Yes. Oh, yes. And when Brexit and the election are over, then it's all going to fire back up again because there will be a lot to discuss then. But now it's very, very partisan and very tribal. So there isn't. Everyone's virtue signaling at the moment and politically campaigning, throwing their memes, throwing their articles back and forth. It's all attack and defense and that kind of thing. And when that happens, it's all about personalities rather than the actual issues. They tend to take a back seat. And that's why it's difficult for YouTubers, because for a YouTuber to work well, they have to be talking about issues so that they get the widest cast of people who would be possibly interested in that video. And when you have to talk about people, you've already made a partisan decision. So half those people desperately don't want to listen to you, or they want to listen to you and insult you.
And sometimes it's more than half, because sometimes just about somewhere between 70 to 90% of the population might be against you. In certain issues, even if you're convinced that you're completely in the right, which makes it more difficult to grow. I'm trying to carve a bit of a niche for myself. I'm as being a men's rights advocate and open about it.
Yeah.
And of course I'm also a women's rights advocate, but that's take that for granted.
Yes, go on then. Try telling that to a feminist.
I'm not a feminist. I'm an anti-feminist. But
I know, but if you try telling that to a feminist that, oh, I'm a men's rights activist, so by default I'm a women's rights activist, oh, they would tear your head off.
Right.
They said, no, feminism supports the rights of women and men. No, we said that first.
I'm aware of most of the feminist arguments, but
God, yeah.
Through people like Sargon and people like Baring and Teal Deer, who I enjoy.
Yeah.
I think I would be relatively. I would be relatively okay with debating with engaging in an informal debate with a feminist.
Yeah, it's a total waste of time, but yeah.
Well, most of the videos I make, I realized that evidence-based assertions don't work well with progressives in general, which is why a lot of the videos I make use very simple language and common sense reasoning, as opposed to that.
Yes. Just 1 second. There's just the phone going. I've just got to grab it quickly. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. They're gonna call back later.
So I'm very interested because I'm very interested in actually convincing other progressives in the same way that I was convinced through common sense reasoning that yes, this is a faulty ideology, and
Yeah.
I feel like
I was convinced by meeting these people and how they behave to other people, and how they go. I was convinced by seeing the effects of call out culture, and I thought, oh, this is gross. Because when I first experienced it, I was in various different game clans, and invariably during a war or something, you would get someone calling someone a faggot, and then somebody on another team making it a big fucking social issue. And they would go around saying, oh, you can't say this, you can't say that. Your team's got to quit and say sorry and apologize for the war and shit like that. And it was all done for the worst reasons, the most purely personal, we want to get one over on someone type reasons. And then I saw it in atheism, of people being cleared out of atheist groups for all this social justice politics, and people being banned everywhere and insulted and called all these bloody names by lefties. And then they went on and did it in to men's rights, to Gamergate. And so people all along have quite naturally got fucking fed up with these people. They now know about a politics they never had any wish to know about, Marxism and shit like that. And so they've been grudgefully made into anti-Marxist warriors. And as a result, they really want this bloody culture war to be over. And they want the left never to be able to fucking start this crap again. And I don't blame anyone involved in the movement. That's why every time I see all this shit thrown at people saying, oh, the Nazis, the racists, the this and that, I know always, categorically 100%, it's always untrue, because these people have come to this exactly the same way as I have. From seeing the mild, nice Marxism of be nice to your neighbors, don't slag off the gay people, this kind of thing, to being like kind of, oh, you're evil and this and a bigot and a fascist and this if you don't agree to. Yeah,
that's what Marxism is. It's dividing, it's compartmentalizing the population into various groups based on arbitrary factors and saying Group A is attacking Group B. That's what Marxism is.
I know.
So there's no nice version. There's no nice version of Marxism. I mean, you might say,
Hungarian
classical liberalism, you might say, leaves some room for gay acceptance, or not, if not acceptance, then just gay basic human rights.
Yeah, and minority rights as well.
And in fact, you don't even need to accept
that ended slavery.
You don't even need to accept it. You just need to give them basic human rights. So, I guess I would consider myself a classical liberal. I espouse liberal principles as they existed prior to the rise of Marxism.
Yeah, a cuck, as we call you. Yeah.
Excuse me?
No, we call everyone a cuck who's not on the right. Oh, actually, we don't. That's an old hat.
Well, the thing is, classical
brackets around your name.
Classical liberalism isn't necessarily left wing, as we would refer to it nowadays. In fact, it would be one of the main tenets of liberalism is an emphasis on free markets. So that's why I consider myself an economic moderate.
Yeah, I mean, but we do see less economic Marxism these days than we see social Marxism. So
social totalitarianism is what it is.
Yeah, social totalitarianism, and it's and with the global corporatists in tow, there won't be anything social about it anymore. It'll just be totalitarianism.
Oh, absolutely. I can see that. I can see the transition.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other reason
or the progression into that, if you will.
Yeah, there's no other reason for these rich people to be so interested in all these communist social ideas about equality, because all those ideas cost a lot of money to make happen, and that means paying a lot of tax, and they don't want to pay a lot of tax. They don't even want their workers to pay a lot of tax, because that means they have to make their wages more remunerable in the first place. So, like, all these people that are expecting wonderful social programmings and a fairness utopia, they can forget all that. That's not what's coming at all. You know, if why will a new society need lesbian, gay, and transgender people? Why bother feeding these useless eaters? You know, they're going to kill themselves at 30. That's how they would look at it. They're going to kill themselves at 30. They're going to want all this expensive surgery. You know, they're going to find themselves disagreeing and getting trouble with their workmates, and then they're not going to breed and provide progeny to pay for their pensions. Why don't we just kill them now? They're a drain on the state. Yes, let's find a reason to kill them all. Okay, next item of business. That's what happened. That's what'll happen again.
Yeah, I know. I do notice the beginnings of that with particularly the feminist movement, who are. I've seen more and more feminists come out against homosexuals in general, or particularly white heterosexual homosexuals, because they're white males. You know, they're easy targets.
They call them cis gay men now, don't they? Cis sexual gay men. Oxymoron upon oxymoron.
Just moron.
Yeah, moron on moron.
Forget the oxy.
Piles
actually it's feminist. Actually, it's feminist, so oxy is probably involved.
Yes. Right.
Thought I'd throw in a funny there.
Yeah, I didn't get it. Oxy.
OxyContin.
Oh right, do they do a lot of that then?
Yeah. Basically, shoveling pills in every fucking day.
Yeah, I thought this because I remember looking at what was it? It was a mini Trump rally, I think. It wasn't one of the Milo events, and these feminists protested it. It was up in Portland, and they all looked like they were on large doses of speed. They all had this. Wow, they all had this shiny, sheeny, pale skin that speedheads often have, big bulging eyes, and a lot of them were sort of gurning with their jaw and chewing when they weren't talking and that kind of thing. And I thought, you fucking lot are all on fucking speed, aren't you? Jesus Christ, they drug you up for these fucking events. I thought, how inhuman can you get? They're like drugging up their activists' blood.
I almost want hard, Schedule 1 drugs to be legalized. Yes. For the simple reason that dumb people will no longer be able to breed.
Yes, give them enough rope and let them hang. Yeah,
exactly. But, I mean, that seems to be a good reason as any to support legalization of anything.
It would. But how many people are these fuckers going to mug? And what happens when they eventually go totally crazy and they're running around naked trying to bite police officers? I mean,
I don't. Yeah, and you can't shoot them because they're black.
Yes. Well, you see why all these insane hypocrisies.
You're gonna have to let them kill you.
Yeah, you can see why there's been a rise in the far right, and you can see why the people in the new far right don't particularly like the far right fascist Nazi ideas, don't particularly understand the far right fascist Nazi ideas, and are constantly checking themselves for becoming cucked by left-wing ideas, because most of us are already pre-indoctrinated with these ideas. We're trying to find a new reasonable way between an old set of ideas and another old set of ideas that are both types of socialism, neither work, and we're trying to rescue from all that crap something workable to add to our sort of right-wing conservative ideas of preserving the world and preserving our families and our races and our cultures for the future. Traditionalism, yeah. A lot of it is traditionalism. A lot of it involves religion. A lot of it involves nationalism. And very, very little of it involves hating Jews. There is.
What is your religious affiliation, or don't you have any?
I'm a sort of deist, from a Catholic family raised in a sort of Church of England background.
All right.
I used to be an atheist. I think I mentioned atheism earlier.
Right, you did. But you mentioned arguing against Christians.
Yeah, and generally it would be the exciting ones, the evangelistic ones like Ray Comfort, Cy ten Bruggen-Carty, Ken Ham and his mates. And what's that? There's another guy, father and son thing, that are quite that do quite good arguments. I mean, it's apologetics. That's what I was interested in, the apologetics of atheism and Christianity. And then of course I moved on to Islam, which is really where I came to blows with the left in the atheist movement and split off entirely, because you can't criticize Islam in atheism.
I would consider myself an atheist. I was raised in a moderate Catholic family, which in America, a moderate might be different from being a moderate in the UK. But anyway, yeah, I sort of drifted away. I sort of drifted away from Christianity slowly. There was no epiphany moment. Basically, as I became more educated, I sort of drifted away from it. But I've always had a sense of tolerance for moderate Christianity. I'm not going to argue against somebody who's not bothering anybody else, and that's where I really came to blows with some other people on the left, who basically want to destroy faith in all its forms. There's this sort of militant atheism.
I remember about 7 or 8 having had a little bit of Bible instruction here and there and that kind of thing, suddenly thinking to myself, hang on, this book is impossible. All this stuff, it's a load of crap. This just is impossible to happen. All of this, people dying, being born again, water to wine, it's all bullshit. And they keep pouring bullshit and bullshit and bullshit. And then they tell you it's true. This is a test, isn't it? I'm being tested here to see if I fall for this, my life is going to suck because they'll give me all the shit jobs. But if I sort of knowingly wink to everyone else that I know it's not true, even though it is true, then all the smart kiddies will realize I'm one of them as well. And that's how I was sort of thinking at the time in my childhood. They're quite devious as a child. But I convinced myself slightly that, this religion shit is some kind of idiot test.
Sorry. Were you in one of those classes where everybody around you just sort of nodded to each other and like, yeah, we know this is bullshit. Let's just finish it.
To an extent, because I was quite young, so I wasn't all that aware of what other people were thinking.
Oh, that's right. You said
but yeah, I remember having this fantasy because that it was something a little more than it seemed, and of course it was, but not in my childlike estimation of what it was. You could see I was still placing a lot of faith in the system, that for some reason it was some kind of test that I'd been given or something to, like, some sort of credulity.
Optimistic in retrospect.
Yeah, but but no, it really was. There really were idiots around me that were actually believing it, and everyone else was just humoring them because they were too weak.
It is a sense of it. It is in one sense an intellectual exam.
Yeah.
See which children are intelligent enough to realize this is bullshit and which aren't. I mean,
yeah. Or maybe to go even further and see beyond, which I think is what was intended by the schools, to see beyond the book and think, wow, this actually is a good pattern and a good modus operandi for life. This is a good way to go through things. And then maybe to see further beyond that and think, actually, no, that's a sucky way to go through life. You're going to get ripped and abused by everyone once they see what a soft touch you are.
I'm very wary of Christianity. You mentioned before that Judaism really was the sort of foundation for Marxist thought, and Christianity is essentially socialism married to paganism. Socialist Jewish ideas mixed with pagan ideas. Obviously, the idea of virgin birth and the idea of resurrection they're patently Greco-Roman concepts.
And there's a lot of hate in that book for the big global hegemony of the day, the Roman Empire. I mean, that's quite socialist. There's a lot of hate for the priest classes. There's a lot of love for the common man, raising the people above all the potentates and kings.
There's a great hatred of capitalism as well, and the acquisition of wealth.
Yep.
I mean, that's consistent throughout the entire Bible.
Fucking hell. Bloody Christians, as bad as yids.
I would keep that to yourself.
Yeah.
Especially Although, but it's logically sound. It's logically sound that Christianity is an extension of Judaism in the same way that Marxism is an extension of Judaism.
Yeah, and that some Christianity might be just as Zionist as Judaic versions of it.
Well, look at the history.
There are, aren't there? There's all these evangelicals who are. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of it. and it was never really a empire. There was the Catholic Empire, then
well, Christian empires. I said empires as
Protestantism.
in plural.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah. Franks and shit and Byzantines, and the Roman Catholics, yes, and the Buddhists.
It's interesting to see how many barbarians who as soon as they became settled, like, lost their pagan faith and converted to Christianity. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think to an extent, some of that with pagan religions, they're very site specific. You have to go to a place where the god resides. So if you're settled and you're not traveling around all these different places anyway at that certain time of the year following herds, then religion becomes a bit of a pain visiting all these shrines. So you might as well have something that you can either take with you or that just sits with you nearby. Like cross and altar, you can set one of those up anywhere with some sticks and some rocks, as it were.
Absolutely, yes.
It must have been fun in those days.
Especially, my favorite part was dying of dysentery at 35.
Yes. Did you do that often?
I didn't.
It's a great way to go.
Didn't say that correctly.
It's painful but fulfilling.
Especially if you're one of those kinky bastards.
Yeah. God, Jesus. I think I split the pan that time. Yeah. We've probably come to a logical conclusion for now, haven't we?
All right. Do you want to do this again at some point? Because this is interesting.
I could certainly do a part 2 with maybe some more structured questions that could lead us from one place to a finale, as it were. That might
probably
be fun.
This was more of a meet and greet, if anything, if nothing else.
Yeah, I didn't think we could get more than a probing around the subject and a feeling out of where maybe the borders to the alt-right are, and that.
I'll ask some. I think I should write some things out beforehand and have a slip of paper in front of me so I can.
Yeah,
basically keep some kind of structure.
Yeah,
but as I said, I'm sorry.
There's a couple of good information points I could bring with me. One of them is a couple of maps that have been made of the alt-right, showing all these different people's names in different colors and how their particular areas of the alt-right and their thinking in the alt-right relates to it as a whole. And then you see it really is a network of all these different bloggers and YouTubers all thinking very different things. And this is why I say it's not a movement, trust me, and it's not all that much to do with National Socialism, because they're only a tiny little clump over there on the left of the blob. And there are so many other people in there, people that Milo's on the map, Judgy Bitch is on the map, people from the men's rights movement, Cernovich is there, Stefan Molyneux is on there.
What about Kraut?
Kraut, no, he's a centrist. He's very much a centrist, slightly left-leaning. Very much in the same mode as yourself, maybe, or
if he's a social libertarian. If he's a social libertarian, then absolutely, and I think he is. He comes out against free speech all the time, so I'd say we'd be relatively in the same place. I've taken some of those political ideology tests, and I've always come out relatively moderate, slightly to the left, and social libertarian.
I have a nice libertarian view of free speech, in that it's excellent fun to shout fire in a crowded theatre. It shouldn't be illegal. If people are stupid enough to get themselves trapped in the door when there's a no fire, fuck them. Evolution would have got them.
Also, if people are psychologically weak enough to kill themselves over something you said to them, well, good.
Yeah. If they're afraid of the flames, they deserve to die.
Particularly if they haven't yet reproduced. It's a terrific idea.
Yeah, I'd allow them to run for the doors if they haven't yet reproduced, but everyone else should just die nobly for the cause.
I understand the concept of eugenics, and I don't necessarily endorse it, but I respect it.
I could see why they came up with the concept, but I think they haven't looked at it with enough nuance for a system that is massively complex and has been trolling it, that has repercussions over millions of years. I don't think transhumanism and fucking about with the very magical way in that things evolve is too much of a good idea, excepting maybe cases where we can really tell we're getting rid of a nasty disease that
Well, I have a very basic ideas of people who are who are monumentally stupid or monumentally damaged in some way, or have some kind of inheritable disease. I don't want them to have children. I mean, I'm not going to fight for them not to have children, but I want to convince. I don't want them. I don't. I mean, it's odd. It's odd when you want to do something for the sake of somebody who for the sake of somebody who doesn't exist.
Yeah, I know there's very many of us on the right, or the alt-right, who would say, why are we doing this? We're listening to the left. They say they're aborting millions of people a year. And they say, oh, no, but we have to have these poor crippled babies, these autistic kids and these Down syndrome kids. And we have to let them get to 40 and then die horribly and painfully from the diseases and genetic conditions that they already suffer from. But it makes us feel good to have them around. And it's kind of horrible, you know.
Another reason I'm in favor. That's a good reason to be in favor of gay marriage as well. At least for males, and for females, it's a little bit more, biologically unsound. But for male homosexuality, you're essentially getting rid of, because it's mostly just beta males who are sleeping with each other. You're getting rid of unnecessary.
Oh, right, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, but no, because the trouble is, these gay people are really, really intelligent, though, and I'm going to borrow one of Milo's arguments here. Gay people are often vastly intelligent than their straight counterparts. Unfortunately,
I want you to know, I'm bisexual myself, so
you see, there you go. I mean, and in the old days, when there was a taboo against homosexuality, these guys would still father children, and you'd often get some really wonderful and very clever kids.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
When homosexuality is tolerated, they can have gay marriages and adopt someone's children.
Well, here's the thing. There's always been, I think of Greece and Rome, and the most intelligent people always were homosexual.
Well, no. Homosexuality was tolerated in certain ways.
Well,
older men and younger people often wore that kind of thing brushed under the carpet, but people were expected to marry, and the Greeks and Romans would.
Well, when I think of homosexuality, I don't think of. I'm not speaking of marriage. I mean the act itself.
Yeah.
They had a very unique view of sexuality, one that's very different from ours, where it was essentially women for families, men for pleasure.
Well, perhaps, but that's the way it's related to us through modern lenses. Oh fuck! I forgot my real point.
Oh, I apologize.
It doesn't matter. But they were still executing people for this kind of stuff.
Really,
two blokes couldn't set up home. There would have to be some pretense.
I wasn't speaking specifically of marriage. I was speaking of homosexual acts.
Yeah, and of course it all changed because the Greeks and the Romans did not have this Abrahamic perspective on it all. That nobody had come out and said, this is terrible, this must be banned. They just thought, this is immature, it's unproductive, you have to grow up now and get a wife.
I'm not sure really what the dogma of the Greco-Roman religions were. I'm not terribly educated on that.
Well, it's massively affected by caste and position, because there was patriarchy then. There was privilege. If you were an emperor, you could fuck who you liked. If you're a patrician, you'd probably have to get married, but you could still fuck who you like. If you're in the Roman army, maybe less so. You could fuck boys, but you're not allowed to have a wife. Shit like that. Right? You can do that camp maiden, but if you're seen sleeping with that rich woman, that's a fucking problem, mate, and we'll cut your fucking head off and throw you out of the army.
Yeah.
In that order. But so it was weird. It was incredibly nuanced, and it still was a love that dared not speak its name to a degree. But there were instances, much like in Islam, where it doesn't matter, and slightly to an effect in Judaism. Here, all the infidelity stuff is normal between grown adults, but as soon as a grown man starts fucking a child or a goat or something like that, oh, well, they're not real people. They've not been baptized yet. It doesn't matter. It's just not a godly soul. It doesn't fucking matter what you do, as long as its parents aren't annoyed. As long as it's not someone rich.
Doesn't Leviticus have injunctions against bestiality and pedophilia?
Yeah, but you've got to remember, like, this was a broad church in those days, and there were all sorts of different sects and covens of Judaism, and there were things that like were banned for people, and there were the things that were okay for the priesthood.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
like lying with, and then in one I was talking about Christianity, and then in one I'm talking about Islam, because clearly they're not particularly too bothered about fucking goats, because nothing was ever particularly specified about fucking goats. Well, either they all did it or no one did.
Both Islam and Christianity both are children of Judaism, so I use Judaism as the
yes.
Sorry.
No, no. It's what they Abrahamic faiths, aren't they? I mean, they weren't Jews then; they were Hebrews then.
Well, I think Judaism officially became codified with the, I guess you can call it publishing of the Quran.
I think it was
in the 5th century BC.
Well, it was when the Romans went stomping around Judea, calling them all Jews.
So Jew, Jew would be
the Romans started it.
A Roman. I would say that the religion of Judaism would have been, in retrospect, we can say that the religion of Judaism was officially codified in the 5th century BC with the publishing of the Torah.
I'll have to get Marek Bestiak in touch with you at some time, because he's the Jewish expert. Yeah, he's the guy behind the podcast, The Merchant Minute. And it was his show that started off all this bracket stuff, all the echoing around Jewish names. Because every time he'd read out one of these Jewish names in his story, like this echo would appear out of nowhere, and he'd go into a Jewish voice. Like, so 1 minute he'd be reading a news story. This news just in from New York Times correspondent Maury Sheckelstein. 4 men today were arrested outside, and then carry on normally. And he still does it, and it's brilliant.
You do a terrific Southern American accent.
Well, this is it, But if you've ever, another person you should check out is Evalion88. She was a YouTuber. You can only find her stuff on Mirrors now because her channel got taken down due to that swine Onison, who is probably Jewish. And she does this video about how to spot a Jew. And she really does go into the voice that kind of Jews have, how they have the wine, or they have this big gruff kind of thing. And she's saying
it's a comedy piece. It's a comedy piece, right?
It's a bit of both. Nobody can be quite sure whether Evalion is just a tiny little 16-year-old girl putting it on, or whether she's generally as Nat Sock as it comes. She's teenage girl Hitler. I love her. I think she's wonderful.
You have to write these people's names down in the chat so I can remember them.
Yes, well, you'll run into them. No, I've remembered. And hopefully people will forget. But yeah, they're worth checking out.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to go and do my, because we're very busy in the alt-right. I mean, I've got parade in a minute, then we've got high altitude practice, and then I've got to clean my schmizer and yeah, that kind of thing.
All right. Well, this was, I guess it was somewhat productive. We met each other, so.
Yeah. No, this has been productive. It hasn't gone as off topic as most of these things do. So it's been fine.
Is this going to be on your channel?
Yeah. And
okay.
You can re-upload it from your channel.
I can't upload anything longer than 15 minutes because I have a copyright strike.
Oh.
From something I uploaded involving Richard Dawkins, and I couldn't get a counterclaim successful.
No, probably because you were guilty of the copyright infringement.
Yeah,
If you
it's
use longer than
probably longer than 20 seconds now that I remember.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fucking petty, but
And
yeah.
it was CNN. It was CNN of all people.
Yeah,
whatever.
I think it's disgusting that news corporations are copywriting that stuff because that's only ever going to be used for fair use. I mean, if somebody starts putting their news reports up whole on the hour every hour, or is mirroring their channel in its entirety, then yeah, jump on them from a fucking height. But when people are talking about elements of the news, it's you know, I suppose they do own the copyright.
The 20-second rule is ridiculous, I think. You've probably talked about this ad nauseum with other people, so.
Yeah, nobody's going to make their point in 20 seconds if it's worth listening to. How do you comment about a political speech? It's going to be longer than 20 minutes, and the footage will be owned by a television company. So it effectively means everyone's censored from making content based on that content because CNN own it. It's not a desirable situation for democratic states. That is very, very, very soft censorship.
It's very dangerous once news organizations start behaving as if they are businesses that have those kind of rights to their news stories. Imagine if 200, 300 years ago somebody was out on the corner talking about a news article and they got arrested for that. This is the same thing, or they got censored in some way. This is the same exact thing.
It is. It is. Just done in a new, interesting way that they hope will slip past the mind of the public. And it does. It does. Right.
Well, I suppose I'll talk to you later. I hope so.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm totally up for a part 2. Or maybe a bigger thing because I know more people than myself in the alt-right. I'm sure I could shake a stick at them to come and talk.
I could get a wider viewpoint. All right.
No, I mean you're one of the most enjoyable interviews I've done in the last 2 months, I think.
Well, thank you.
That's a lot of people will. You've let me talk. You haven't tried to gotcha me or turn it from an interview into a fiery debate, and it's been great. I would happily do it again.
I went in completely without any preconceived notions about what the alt-right is, and I still, I guess I have a basic idea of what your opinions are, and I'm not going to make any sweeping generalizations based off of them.
Yeah, and I mean, for every one of my opinions, there's a more extreme one and a weaker one, and that is the reality of the alt-right.
Just very interested in learning about this thing that it's not an organization, obviously, but this group of people who I've never been privy to before. So I'm interested in learning for its own sake.
Probably the most outstanding feature of the alt-right is its music. It's amazing at doing parody songs. There's probably about 60, 70 different parody songs done by people, all these different people. A lot of the people who cyber Nazis one to look out for, who does alt-right inspired vaporwave. Marek does a lot of parody songs. Merchant Fascistia.
The first person that comes to mind is Dr. Randomacam.
Well, he's men's rights, really. He wouldn't appreciate being called alt-right at all.
I think he's actually more left-leaning anyway, so I don't really...
Yeah, I think he is.
But he does make parody songs of progressives.
He has some elements of traditionalism to him, I think. And that is slightly alt-righty. But the real people are the Blink 1488 and the right-wing Death Squad people. They do a lot of proper music. I mean, Blink 1488 is all obviously a Blink whatever parody, but yes, we parody everything.
I think it's one.
That's it. Yeah.
I only know it because I was looking through the song library for a video game called Rock Band, and They had some songs from a band called Blink-182. I just learned of their existence just a few days ago, so it's just lucky that I knew that name.
Yeah, you see, because like 1488 is sort of a National Socialist code for Hitler's birthday.
Okay, I was assuming it was some year, you know.
I mean, the Germans themselves. Yeah, the Germans themselves would do things like this to honor Hitler. One of their most famous guns, the 88, had an 88mm barrel because that was the numbers of Hitler's birthday or something.
Oh, okay.
Crazy people. Crazy people.
All right.
So farewell then, all. Thanks for listening, audience. Even though many of you have been ordered to listen. Oh yeah, I'm the one who gets to turn it off. I was forgetting I'm hosting. Okay. Well, thanks for talking to me, Saintclare, and I shall definitely see you again.
Iain. Thank you. Or do I call you Iain, or do I call you alt-right ultras?
Yeah, Iain is my name, and I tend to use that because otherwise people accuse you of being incredibly anonymous and not having the courage of your convictions. Basically.
Well, my first name is Jordan, if that makes you feel.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I generally go by your channel name.
Yeah, Saintclare is sort of a moniker I like to go by. You know how Sargon goes by Sargon, even though his real name is something incredibly gray and lifeless.
It's Carl Benjamin. Apparently. I don't know where that's from, but
it might be his name.
It's probably Swindon or the West Country somewhere where all these Benjamins live.
Yeah, he is from Swindon, actually.
There you go then.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.
The little ghetto of Swindon. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.